Welcome to We Love Deck Builders, the podcast dedicated to empowering deck industry pros to construct a thriving business. Join your host, April Edwards, founder of Deck Builder Marketers, as she brings you a cheat sheet of industry secrets and strategies that promise to boost your deck building business. Whether you're a battle-tested pro or just starting your entrepreneurial journey, this podcast is your arsenal for expert insights and actionable advice. So tune in and let's carve a path to business growth, one insight at a time.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to We Love Deck Builders podcast. I am not April Edwards. April is a little bit under the weather today, so I'll be filling in for her. She'll be listening in and she'll be typing me notes if I go astray. So, Viking, if you're out there, I'm going to have April make sure she gives me guidance how to respond to you. Tommy, if you're out there, I'm not going to become a deck builder. I'm going to stick with my role. But, well, we've just gone live, so people will be strolling in. And so, Dan, I'll give you a proper introduction a little bit later. But we'll have a little fun at first. So I grew up in Boston. That's why I'm wearing Patriots logo, right? Grew up outside. I live in Northeast Ohio now, which is why Ohio State, go Bucks, OH. And are you in New Jersey?
Yes, sir.
Do you follow football? Are you Giants fan? Jets fan?
I am a Giants fan.
All right.
It's been a rough few decades.
Well, you say it's been a rough few decades, but our undefeated Pats team lost to your Giants. So
that is true.
You did it. You stuck it to us twice. But are they the New York Giants or the New Jersey Giants because they play in Meadowlands?
Well, originally when I first liked them, I did live in Staten Island, New York, so they were New York Giants then, and then I did move to New Jersey, so they're still New York Giants, I think, to me, even though they play in New Jersey. It's all good.
All right, something that we didn't talk about pre-show, but Antonelli. So that means you're a Paisan, correct?
Yes.
So my great-grandparents emigrated from Italy. And so I grew up in an Italian family in an Italian town. My dad was Heinz 57, but, my mom, all her people are Italian. So my great-grandmother came over from Naples. And so anyway, I got to know, what's your favorite pizza over there in New Jersey?
Oh, it's funny. Today is actually what we call Pizza Thursday here in the office, where we buy pizza for the whole team. So today we had some chicken bacon ranch. So that's one of my favorites. Very
nice. Very nice. We've been going a couple minutes, so we'll go ahead and start the intro here. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of We Love Deck Builders podcast, your go-to space for real conversations, real strategies, and real stories from the leaders in shaping the deck building industry. I am not April Edwards. I'm Bobby Warren, copywriter here at Deck Builder Marketers, your number one partner for success in the deck building industry. And we don't just manage campaigns, we drive your growth, help you dominate, and ensure your thriving success. If you're a deck builder doing solid work but still not getting the leads you want, your branding might be the problem, and you might not even realize it. And today, even though we love deck builders, we also love branding specialists like Dan Antonelli, CEO of KickCharge Creative, and he's going to break down how branding affects trust, lead quality, and how which builders and homeowners I'm messing this up. So our video editor might have to work overtime, but he's going to help home builders and home services, what they need to know before they ever pick up the phone. So how can your branding help people understand just what you're doing? And so a little bit about me before we get started. I grew up outside Boston, Massachusetts, in a town called Revere. We called it Severe Revere, a bunch of Italians there, Dan. And now I live in Northeast Ohio, about an hour away from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. For college, I'm a Buckeyes fan, but for a long time, I was a journalist. I've won several awards. And I had the opportunity when I left journalism, I started my own business, and it was basically SEO-based content writing company, right? And I had the chance of contracting with April, Go Hawks, but I had a chance of working with April, and then eventually April said, "Hey, would you work with me full time?" And I said yes. And so that kind of leads me into something that maybe I'm throwing a little bit of a curveball. But when I started working with April, right, the culture she has built in this company is incredible. And she's not paying me to say this, although I know my account manager, you, Anita, will say I'm sucking up to the boss, but I'm not, right? I absolutely love working for April, love working for her and with her at Deck Built Marketers, right? She has built an incredible culture where everyone is seen, everyone's heard. She wants everyone to give input into how to make this company better. And so, Dan, as a branding specialist, right, one of the things I was thinking about is with this idea of branding, right? Does it start inside with the team first and then work outside into clients? So if you'll think about that, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe tell me about how this branding can work from the inside out.
Sure. So first off, Bobby, thank you for having me on today. I'm excited to talk about branding. This is actually our 31st year in business. So it just kind of blows my mind that literally 40 years ago, I was hand lettering service vans in my parents' backyards. And that's really how I got my start. I was doing sign painting. I wanted to be a sign painter. My parents thought it'd be a better idea for me to go to college. So I did get a degree in communications. And after I graduated, I really did miss working with other contractors and helping them. And I always thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a single place that these contractors could go to get all their marketing needs handled under one roof? So for me, starting with the logo was the most important piece of that initial puzzle, right? So, so 40 years later, we've designed over 3,000 home service brands in that particular time period. We just hired our 55th employee. So, it's been a crazy journey. And, we just look at the fact that we get to work with so many home service businesses as a unique blessing. And we're so grateful that we get to work with these contractors and really help change their lives. And it's a responsibility that we really care deeply about. And we're very fortunate to have so many teammates alongside myself just working towards that mission is building brands that change lives, and seeing the impact and seeing how much our work does affect marketing spends and their ability to cultivate a better culture, grow a team, lower their marketing spend, all those things. It's pretty phenomenal that, again, it's like 40 years later, and I still get excited when I see a logo we designed on a truck, and I see a truck wrap we designed and see it in person. And so it's pretty remarkable, and just super grateful to still be doing that so many years later.
That that is awesome. So now, what about this aspect of like, April has built the culture here,
Mhm.
but like,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think as you think about brand, you have the two components. You have an internal component, you have an external component. A lot of times the brand can be the anchor for what the team rallies behind, right? So what is our why, and can our why be wrapped up in our branding? And I'll give you a great example of a company that we renamed and rebranded about 4 years ago, and it was a company previously called PMA Mechanical, and we renamed them Grasshopper, and became Grasshopper Heating and Air, and they went strictly residential. The really interesting thing about grasshoppers is they can only move forward. Grasshoppers cannot physically move backwards. So the symbolism behind that particular brand became so powerful, and the tagline, which is "Forward is a way of life," became central to their culture. So we as a company will always be moving our team forward. We will be elevating our team along the way, and we will be helping them to grow always. So seeing how that has, they were at 2 or 300,000 in revenue, and I think this year they surpassed 30 million in revenue. So it's
uh,
been a remarkable journey, but it all started with the foundation of that brand and that brand story. So that was, I think, a great example of a brand that was internally focused as well as externally focused. So 100%, it's so important.
yeah, that's interesting. We're only moving forward, right?
Yeah.
Um, so as we think about branding, right? Deck Builder Marketers serves uh, a number of different clients, right? Um, and to hear you say that today you have 55 employees. So I have to imagine you began with one, right? Maybe you
Began with
maybe
one in my basement, and it was just me.
right. Now, now I read something about you as like a pinstripe artist,
Hmm.
and all I could think about was like those classic cars,
Yeah.
the little pinstripes. But any April Edwards is here on YouTube. That's good to know, April. I better not talk bad about you since you're watching me. But so hearing you go from like 1 to 55, some of our deck builders want to scale.
Hmm.
So kind of like, what are some of the steps involved from like a business and a branding perspective? Like, what do they need to think about as they scale?
Oh, it's funny because I think people instinctively want to credit me with so much of the growth and so much of the success. And I say if I'm able to take credit for anything related to our growth, I mean, I'm sure there's a few things I could take credit for, but I would say the most important thing that I've learned was to just hire people that were much smarter than myself in different areas, and areas that I wasn't passionate about. So about 5 years ago, I promoted someone internally to be our COO. And that was a game changer really for this organization. Like it changed the whole trajectory of the company because she was just such an amazing operations person, as well as someone that was so deeply rooted in building a stronger culture internally. And I'll give you a really, I think, impressive stat is that within the last 24 months, we've only had one person voluntarily leave this company. So, turnover for us doesn't really happen. People don't really leave here once they're onboarded. It's very rare to have someone leave, but so much of that is due to the work that she's done and the strides that she's made in terms of fostering a great culture. And it's not that we had a bad culture before, but there wasn't probably as much effort put into it. And it's, again, just we're so busy, we're so slammed, and it just wasn't something that we focused on. We did try to make sure we were always taking care of our people, and we never had a ton of turnover previously, but the culture I think today is much better. And then just her leadership has helped us grow significantly. And I think for me, the biggest lesson on is learn to step back and to know that there's other people that can do a better job at certain tasks, and not have an ego about that particular fact. Be able to recognize that, like, I don't know all these things, right? I don't know some of these things, and there's other people here that if you let them step up to the role, they will embrace it, and they will just perform. So seeing what she's been able to build and help over the last 5 years is just remarkable.
That's neat. That's neat to hear. Allowing your team to take ownership and move things forward. That's awesome.
Yep.
But now, like, our focus is on deck builders. You deal with home services, plumbing, HVAC, general contractors, garage door installers, and things like that. Like, do you have advice for, like, I'm thinking of, like, maybe there's a person out there is very good at building things, wants to become a deck builder, or maybe they just started and they want to grow, right? Like, what should they know beyond, like, a name, like, or maybe what goes into the name? What do they need to think about with branding to move forward?
Well, I mean, a couple of things to unpack there. I mean, obviously, naming is a huge component to branding, and so many companies get the name wrong literally on day one. So they start the company and they name the company. Maybe it's their last name, which is a mistake. Maybe it's their initials, which is a bigger mistake, right? So sometimes those initial first steps are actually the wrong first steps that they're taking. And then they spend so much time trying to overcome that inherent flaw in their marketing strategy, which is the name. So poor naming is something that hampers a lot of people's growth. It also, generally speaking, means that they need to spend more on marketing. So if you can solve that problem as an initial first step, that's obviously a really important thing, is to make sure we've got a good name. As a matter of fact, the chapter in my book on home service branding, naming is the biggest chapter, because it's, I think, the most important, the most critical. And like I said, generally speaking, the first thing that most get wrong when they start their company. The other thing I would say too, Bobby, is we've done some work for some amazing deck builders, and built amazing brands for them. A lot of these guys, when you look at the level of detail and craftsmanship that they put into their work, and then you look at their previous branding, you can't get there, right? They don't look nearly as good as the service and the quality product that they put out. And so if you can marry up the reality of what they actually do, like, these guys are the best of the best, like, they make these amazing decks, and marry that up with a brand that showcases that, that's typically how you really start gaining a lot of traction, because the expectation will be, just from seeing the branding, that I expect this to be a premium service. I expect to pay a premium price for this. And I think that that's often the challenge that, deck builders, garage door guys, like any of the trades, that they don't look like they deserve to be paid what they're asking, right? But what would happen if you literally looked as good as the work that you actually performed? And that's the hard question that I think owners have to ask themselves. If they have to say, like, hey, listen, if I were to judge your company just by the truck that rolls up on my driveway, what do I think I'm going to get?
You say that, and when I was on your website, and KickCharge.com, I noticed, like, you have before and after sliders on your website.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at this one van that looked beautiful, but when I moved the slider and I saw the old van, The new one is colorful, it's in your face. The old one is flat, white, and you see the rust stains coming down, right?
Yep.
So if you are, so if you see that rusted vehicle show up, you know, that tells me one thing. But you see that beautifully wrapped truck with a lot of color and pop, that sends a different message.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think people forget that, they want to make branding into a very complex thing, right? And there's aspects that are deeper than the surface, but the reality is I sort of look at it as what what can I be doing to control what someone else believes about your company? Like if you want to distill it down to what I'm doing is I'm trying to control what someone believes they might get if they chose to hire you in the absence of any other context. Just they saw the van on someone's driveway. What do I think I'm going to get if I hire them?
Yeah.
And if I can control that narrative as best I possibly can, then we've got a much higher likelihood of booking the job, of getting a higher average ticket, of needing less money to spend on marketing. Like those are all the effects of that, and the notion of disruption, as you just noted, like how do you do something that doesn't blend in, that isn't flat, or white van syndrome, as we call it, when it's a white van that looks like every other white van that's out there, is maximizing every impression that's made, right? So if you think about how many times it normally takes for someone to recognize and remember your brand, well, what if that's 20 times it takes for someone to see it repeatedly to maybe have an impact? What if I could cut that down to 5 times? What if it only took 5 impressions and then I would remember it, right? So thinking about it from that perspective, the terms disruption is something that I talk a lot about in my book. But what are we doing from a brand perspective that disrupts when someone is looking, right? And then causes them to remember what they've seen so that they can recall it later on, right? Because the whole notion of that branding is how do I live in someone's mind, basically rent free, right? So they may not need a deck tomorrow. They may not even need it in a month, but maybe in 2 months, they're like, what was that company that I just saw on Becky's driveway? Oh yeah, that was Deck Builders. Yeah. I'm going to call them instead of going to Google and saying deck company near me, because we know how much we're going to have to pay for that lead then, right? So wouldn't it be much better if they knew your name before they went to Google? How much cheaper would that lead cost you at that point?
Yeah, and that's that's something that April has been talking a lot about lately. How there's so much research that kind of goes on beforehand before someone reaches out to you. But how, like, I know when we were talking, before we went live, you made the comment that branding is foundational. And so, can you kind of like build on that and kind of, you know, give, talk about how, is poor branding causing your company, not you personally, but
Mhm.
is poor branding causing companies to lose out on leads before they ever knew they were in the race?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see it all the time. And, one of the things that I worked so hard on, especially in the second edition of the book, was measuring that data. So things like acquisition cost, pre-rebranding and post-rebranding. What is the impact on that? What is the impact on your booking rate and your close rate? What if your booking rate improved by 10% and your average tickets increased by 15%? What would that actually mean for your business? Well, it would mean obviously more profit. It would mean I would be spending less money on lead acquisition, right? So things like that are affecting the companies especially harder that have poor brands, right? So a lot of companies want to blame the digital marketing company, and they're like, we need more leads, we need more leads, you're not giving us enough leads. And then if you really drill down at the data, a lot of times it's not that you need more leads, it's that you need to do better with the leads that you're getting. But if you have a weak foundation, if your brand is awful, well, how many jobs can you expect to be closing, right? If the foundation is there, if they go to the website and they're not impressed with the way the brand looks, it doesn't make them feel a certain way, it doesn't make it feel like they're going to get a premium job, All these things are the obstacles that you're working to overcome, right? And even the best salesman in the world isn't going to overcome really awful branding, right? You can't convince Mrs. Jones that you deserve to be paid a premium when the truck that rolls up the driveway is rusted out, is poorly laid out, has a poor logo. Like all those things factor into what she thinks that she should pay you, right? So a lot of times it's like an anchor, and I use that analogy like it's an anchor you're dragging around. And yes, you could keep dragging it around, but the end result of that is just expect to pay more money on your marketing. Like it's simple. It's not rocket science. The weaker the brand, the more money you'll have to spend to market your company. It's pretty straightforward, right? But when we look at the before and afters and we truly look at the data in terms of the KPIs that matter most, that's when you see the real impact. So it's always ironic to me sometimes when people are like, well, branding is so expensive. And then I always say, well, how much is it costing you to have a weak brand, right? What's the hidden cost that you experience on a daily basis? These are the same guys that are pissed off with how much they have to pay Google for leads. Like, oh my God, I hate paying PPC. I hate that I have to pay all this money for LSA. And I'm like, well, you're invisible in the community that you're serving. That is why your marketing cost is so high. Fix that, become 5 Mile famous in your community, and your digital marketing will work 1,000 times better.
Yeah, I'm listening. I'm listening to you talk about that, right? And I see. You know, April would love to know if anybody out there has questions about branding for their company. But when I was in college studying marketing, it was one of the three most important things. Location, location, location. As I'm listening to you, I'm now thinking branding, 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 right? Um, because you're right. Like if I think all of us, I'm Italian, right? Whenever I get together with my Italian side of my family, right? It's all, these big feasts and stuff like that. Love food, right? So I'm willing to take a chance on a hole in the wall restaurant for 20, $30, right? But I'm not going to take a chance for tens of thousands of dollars in an outdoor uh, project for something that looks like a hole in the wall builder,
Mm-hmm.
And so how, like, what, my mind's going a mile a minute because you're dropping a lot of knowledge today. But I've heard you talk about rebranding, right? And we've worked with clients who are like in home renovation, home repairs, and then they want to pivot into deck building, right? And then there's sort of like a little bit of rebranding there because now, like, let's say we go from Bobby's home repair, bad name, to Bobby's deck building, another bad name, right? But like like when it like is there any time when it's too late to rebrand, or is it like any advice on like rebranding?
Yeah, I mean, listen, first of all, when we look at renaming a company, there's a lot of benchmarks that we look at to determine whether or not that makes sense. Revenue is one benchmark, right? So how big is the company at this point? Typically, companies under $2-3 million in revenue, it's really not something that I think is an obstacle. If you're at 7, 8, $9 million in revenue, that's a different conversation. So the smaller you are in revenue, the more nimble you are to pivot and make a change. Especially for a business that you are not typically at that home on a 6-month interval, the same way that you would be if you were doing home service like HVAC or plumbing, right? Where you're constantly back in the home doing maintenance, seasonal maintenance, things like that, right? So you have the ability typically to pivot more easily when you're smaller and also when you're typically not in the home quite as frequently. So I think looking at that metric, certainly But people ask questions like, well, what will happen to my Google reviews if I change the name of my company? Or what will happen to my website and my SEO? And those are valid questions. The Google reviews follow you with a name change, so that's typically not a problem. SEO is definitely something to consider. However, again, there's means to account for a brand new domain name and keeping the old domain name up and running for a certain period of time and things like that. So, out of the, I think at this point we've done 100 renames and rebrands. I don't really know of a single instance where anyone has gone backwards, and typically the thing that we hear more frequently is, I wish we had done this sooner. That's really the thing we hear most is, I wish I had done this sooner and invested in this sooner, because they see the effect it's having across the board on the KPIs.
What do you see as kind of the trepidations of those who like don't want to do it? Like maybe their business is like stagnant or growing slowly, but they're afraid to do a rebrand. Like, that like my identity is built into this thing.
I think quite often owners generally overestimate how much brand equity they have, right? Especially if they have weak branding to begin with. But they're like, oh, everybody knows me. And I'm like, really? I don't know if I really believe that everyone knows you, especially when I look at your van that looks like 1,000 other vans, right? So, in the book, I talk about the notion that old brands are like warm blankets to their owners, right? It's like, hey, this logo has gotten me to here. Why would I ever change? It's working. And I always sort of flip that conversation and I say, it is amazing what you've been able to accomplish with that brand. That tells me that you know operations, that you have good systems, you have a great product. But imagine how much further you might have been with a better brand. And I think that that's ultimately the real conversation to have is, and as a saying in my book, it's a quote that I came up with many years ago, but it says, success in spite of a poor brand is not a valid reason to perpetuate it. And, that's truly, I think, a fact that we've seen repeated over and over again. And I think, again, too, it's easy, I think, for people to be skeptics about how powerful a brand can be. And I think it's natural for some people to not understand the full power of it. But once you go through with it and then you're on the other side of it, then it's like, oh my God, like this is a game changer. This has changed my life. This has changed the game for us as a business. But without understanding what's on the other side, I can certainly appreciate that you may be reluctant to change something that you feel is working. But if you really look at the metrics and the KPIs, I doubt it's working nearly as well as you might suspect it is.
Yeah. I'm sitting there looking at the logo on your shirt, the logo on your hat, the color on your hat, the color on your chair, the color on the poster behind you, the color on the wall of your office.
You can look at my watch too.
And like, there are like just so many elements that your company touches when it comes to branding. So like, what are the kind of things that you get, your clients thinking about when it comes to branding? Because like, my focus has always been on writing, right? So I'm not an expert at branding at all, but like, kind of like, what does you like when someone reaches out to you, like what's their kind of level of understanding about branding? And then where do you lead them to? Where do you guide them to?
Yeah, I think, again, a lot of people start the conversation with a specific need. They just bought a new service van and they're like, hey, we want you to handle the truck wrap design. And here's my logo. Can you design my truck? And 99% of the time, I can't work with what you have currently because it will never function properly for that truck wrap. So you either fix the foundation at that point, or unfortunately, I'm not going to be the right person to assist you because I can't deliver a corresponding ROI on your investment because that logo will never function in a manner in which it needs to on that specific canvas. But I think when people go through the experience and start truly understanding how every single touch point that customer experiences along the journey, and having all those touch points very deliberately crafted and presented, they start seeing how important that is, from the uniform that the guy's wearing, to the social media graphics, to the website, to all those touch points. And to your point, listen, the voice of that brand, the words that brand speaks to, if that brand was a human being and they were at a party, how would they interact with you? So we're very deliberate in looking at content and wording. So when we craft messages, when we do billboards, when we do other marketing pieces that need content, the voice of that brand is equally important to the visuals. And so, we have an amazing content team. We have 5 full-time writers on staff that just draft content that is very deliberately designed in a manner to be uniquely crafted for that specific brand, and then also delivering the voice of that brand and that promise. And that's why too, like some of the stuff happening with AI, I think is creating so much inauthenticity, right? So you look at this content, you look at these generic graphics, you look at these generic websites, or even these AI generated logos, and nothing about them is authentic. And so if Mrs. Jones, who is your target audience, if she's already afraid with who is coming to her home to do work, how does putting out more images that are clearly fake and not authentic help her to feel more confident, help her to establish more trust in your company, right? So there's a flip side to all this amazing AI stuff, and there's a time and place for when to embrace it. But when I see people using it for brand assets, and even brand voice, I'm just like, oh man, like it's becoming painfully obvious when some of this stuff is fake, I think. And so being authentic to your brand is, I think, a really crucial part of the journey that the customer that you're trying to attract, they want to experience that. They want to be authentic. Like I see people using like not stock, just generic AI generated images of people, like fake people that don't work at the company. And it's so clearly fake. And I'm just like, how is this helping Mrs. Jones feel confident about who she's hiring? And the answer is it's not. So, voice, kudos to people like yourself that do copy and do content. It's a really, really important part of the messaging and really important of brand strategy.
Yeah, I've always loved to write, so yeah. My goal in life was to get paid to write, and I was like, after working in journalism for so long, I was thinking maybe I should have gave a little more thought to that, because journalism does not pay well.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but
And we've
it,
hired plenty of journalism folks that worked at newspapers and stuff. I tell you what, you hire someone from a newspaper background, these are the best editors on the planet. We had someone that was working for us. She just retired, but oh my God, like she was so good with, knowing where those commas were supposed to go and an M dash and all that other stuff. But
yeah,
she was super creative too. And, again, just a huge asset for us to have someone that can literally help craft the voice of a brand.
yeah. So, when we bring on new clients, I tell them, I said, hey, I used to be a journalist. Editors change my copy every day. If you see something you don't like it, let me know. It's not going to offend me, because my copy was always changed to get it to be better. But is there anything we haven't talked about yet that, like, you think would be important for deck builders to understand about branding? And again, we're going to put out a call. Anybody out there want to have any questions, feel free to send them in, and we'll
The
get.
biggest thing that I think that we try to stress is the notion of becoming 5 mile famous within the community that you serve. So what can you be doing as an owner to make your brand visible in the community you serve? And I know some of that's not sexy, right? So, hey, we're going to spend this Saturday at a home show and we're going to set up a booth there. We're going to sponsor a bunch of soccer teams and little league teams, and we're going to put our name on the back of kids' jerseys. We're going to put a banner on right field for the softball league, right? So these are all things that are not super sexy in terms of, the compared to other marketing, right? But I will say that they're very effective, and the idea of becoming 5 Mile famous in your community is really important. And the more disruptive your brand is, the more likely you are to be remembered, right? So if you're out there and you're putting up, 18 by 24 white Coroplast signs with, Helvetica lettering saying, custom decks and a phone number, well, why am I going to remember that? So being memorable within the community will help so much of the other efforts. And I'm sure you guys experience when you work with a client on digital marketing and they have an amazing brand and they're invested in the community and people know they exist. Well, you know that when the ad is run and they click on it and they remember seeing this company, that they have a much better shot of getting that lead converted into a sale. And I think so many owners struggle with how much it costs for digital marketing, especially, and how much they have to spend for leads, while ignoring the fact that this invisibility that they have in their own community is why those costs are so expensive.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about our onboarding specialist, Jessie. I believe it was last year or so. She had gone out to Colorado with one of our clients, O'Keefe Built, and they had participated in a kind of like a give back to the community event where they hooked up with a manufacturer, at least one manufacturer, and they built this thing for. I wish I could remember. I think it was like some type of animal shelter, horse therapy. I'm not remembering exactly, but that gets their name out there. And I know we have a client just down the road from me here in Northeast Ohio, Andy from Hen House Decks, where his company's sponsoring, I believe softball teams and things like that. And I always wonder, like, for these people to connect, like for deck builders to connect, offline, like, are you involved in the Chamber of Commerce, right? Are you involved in community events? How are you supporting things that are important to people who live in the communities you serve? And I think those are other things that can help you become, as you call, 5 Mile famous. I like that. Now, is that a term you came up with?
No, that's pretty common vernacular within the marketing space. But I think it makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes too, people are like, well, I need to expand into other areas. And I think quite often there's so much business that's right within 5 miles. But again, being invisible in the community, no one knows that they exist. I didn't know if you wanted to have me share just a few examples, Bobby, but I can certainly do that if you wanted me to.
Yeah, that would be good.
All right, let me see if I can figure out how to do that. So let's see, present, share screen, allow, let's see if it works. I see it on my screen. I don't know if somebody has to allow me to show it. There we go, sweet. So like this is just an example of a brand that we created for Cousins Roofing, Siding, and Decks, and you could see some of the visuals that go along with it. So that's the uniform. This is a letter that was introducing the new brand to their customers. Some equipment stickers, a direct mail piece, some social media graphics. Again, like we mentioned too, the site sign. Like what about this would blend? Like it doesn't blend. It's not white. It's visually interesting, right? So looking at things like that. And that's the actual logo. And then this is the wrap design. So again, if this is parked on my neighbor's driveway, I have a certain expectation of what kind of service that they're getting. Like they look professional, they look trustworthy, they look honest. Tagline pro built, family approved, makes sense to go along with that. Another one that we did for this company here called Pinnacle Decks. Again, very, very cool name, referencing the idea of pinnacle and then building brand assets that sort of leverage the idea of deck building into it. Very unique colors. Colors is such an important part of branding. Picking colors that you can own in your market is a really, really important piece to consider. You can see the stationery that we did for them, and some other things. This is the uniforms for the guys. Some brochures that we created for them, pocket folders, things like that. So, and then Pacific Northwest is another decking company that we built the branding for. Again, unique color palette. They're out in Seattle in that area. When I see this parked on my neighbor's driveway, I'm not expecting it to be the cheapest bid that I'm going to get in my project. I'm expecting it to be a fairly high-end project. And you can see some of the assets, again, the business cards, website, uniforms for the guys.
I love the use of deck boards as the wings. I love that.
Yeah. So again, even just not even having a square site sign, but doing something that is die cut instead, so that it's a little bit more interesting to look at. This is some door hangers that we did for them, some stickers, and then the last one I had that I could share with you is this brand we did for deck work. So again, going to a community event, having a branded table like this. This is the site sign that we did for them. That's the logo itself, and that's the truck wrap design. So again, very good use of color here, very vibrant, not blending into the environment. It's not just another white van in a sea of other white vans. Tagline outdoor living you'll really dig was the tagline that we had written for them. So you could kind of get a sense there on just the idea of disruption and how those elements work together to really communicate that promise.
Yeah. So April is asking, what do you guys out there think about the work done by fellow Paisan Dan Antonelli and his creative team over there at KickCharge? Can you, while we're waiting for some questions to come in, Hassan had asked earlier, like, how long does it typically take for deck builders to see ROI after investing in proper branding?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It varies, I think, in different verticals. I think for sure you see a quicker return on some of the other home service businesses, but I think immediately what you will see is you will be able to charge more money for your work. You should have a better booking rate and a better close rate, and ideally you should be able to spend less on marketing because people would now know your brand name in the community that you serve. I mean, on average, I've seen guys, literally within a week, they've got, $15,000 or $20,000 job that somebody booked just from seeing the truck wrap out there. So that wouldn't be really unusual to start getting a lot of calls right off the bat just from having this well-branded vehicle in the community that they're serving, especially.
So the idea of a truck wrap is interesting to me, because I really never gave it much thought. You see a truck that's wrapped or a van that's wrapped. Oh yeah, that looks neat. But can you speak to the impact that a properly branded wrapped truck or van could have for a local deck builder, local home services company?
Yeah, I mean, dollar for dollar, there is not a single medium that comes close to cost per impression. So you look at the fact that, let's imagine that you spend $5,000 on a truck wrap that has a life expectancy of 5 years, let's just say. It's $1,000 per year. And generally speaking, depending on the market that you're in, you could be looking at anywhere from, 1,000 impressions per day, depending, or more. Like, I mean, depending on where you're driving, but where else could you possibly get 1,000 impressions of your brand on a daily basis, but only spend $1,000 a year to do that? So dollar for dollar, it is the single most effective form of advertising for any contractor, whether it decks, home service, doesn't matter. The problem is that 90% of them, 95% of them are done wrong, done incorrectly, and not maximizing the opportunity that that particular channel affords you. So I will say there's an awful lot of really badly executed truck wrap designs out there. And just making sure that if you're going to invest that money, again, the foundation is so critical. It's why we turn down so much work for people who insist that we use their existing logo, because I know I can never make it effective for them. And I'm not going to take money for something I know I can't deliver a corresponding value or return on investment for.
All right, talking about logos, I'm an untrained eye. I'm not like our design specialist, Wagner. But like I've got a kick out of recent years where you see a company updates its logo. I'm talking about major corporation, right? Updates its logo, and it's like the slightest little change that to the untrained eye means nothing.
Right.
Does it mean anything to you, or are you having a good laugh alongside me?
Well, it's funny. Corporate branding is a different animal. And I think you can brand anything with enough money. And I think that that's the difference. So when I look at the difference between doing branding for small business versus corporate branding, I can get a meaningless symbol to mean something to someone as long as I have enough money to do so. But I sort of look at the opposite for a small business and I say, I don't have the luxury of trying to teach you some meaningless symbol or graphic or icon and what that means to you as a consumer. Instead, I have to present you with something, and even if you only saw it a single time, it means something to you. It connects to you on a deeper level, and it also helps signify what you actually do for a living, right? It sounds painfully obvious, but I think a lot of the tweaks sometimes come from the fact that they're afraid to stray too far from where they were, and there's some value in that. There's some logic behind that, I think, but when I look at the rebrands that we do, very rarely does someone come to us that legitimately has a fair amount of current existing brand equity that I want to leverage on a rebrand. Maybe I might leverage their color scheme if they are very, you know, dominant in their market and they're the only ones using purple trucks. Well, I'm not going to come in there and make them red if they've been using purple for years, right? So I want to leverage what I possibly can. I want to salvage as much as I can that is logical to salvage. But a lot of times there isn't anything at all worth salvaging. And so the transformation is much more radical, and you're definitely going to know the difference between the old logo and the new one.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dan, I appreciate you joining us on the We Love Deck Builders podcast today. So because April's not here, let's check this out. Let me just say this. If today's episode helped you see where branding may be costing you leads, take a closer look at how your business shows up before the first conversation ever happens. Big thanks to Dan Antonelli, CEO of KickCharge Creative, for sharing what actually moves the needles for companies like yours. If you want better leads and definitely stronger first impressions, start with the brand. It matters more than most people realize. So, Dan, before we leave, how can people follow you? How can they learn more about your work and what you do?
Sure. You got the website address up on screen, which is great. You can just hit us up on kickcharge.com. If you guys want to follow me personally, you can just follow me on Facebook at just Dan Antonelli. And I post a lot of content on my Facebook page, just dealing with general marketing and general branding concepts and things like that. So happy to engage with you there. If you're interested in working with us, yeah, just hit us up on kickcharge.com and we'd love to chat.
Yeah, it's always interesting how this industry that we're in continually changes, and you just cannot stand still. You know. All right, and for those listening at Deck Builder Marketers, we help deck builders create marketing systems that attract the right clients and give you more control over your business, so you can stay focused on what you do best. And if you're ready to create a marketing system that actually works for you, book your free strategy session at deckbuildermarketers.com/growth. And if you enjoyed this episode, we appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel, follow it, leave us a review. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe, because it tells YouTube that people like you want that. So Dan, I think I'm going to take just one more minute. Tell us about your book a little bit. I know you've mentioned it, but just give us a little bit about your book.
So I'm going to just hold it up so people can see it, but this is the book this is actually the second edition of the book, called Branded Not Blanded. And essentially, it really just talks through the psychology of home service branding and what you should be thinking about if you're going to try to create a brand, whether you're working with, trying to do it on your own or working through an agency. Just understanding more about the concepts and the psychology behind branding. I think it's a great book. I basically took the last 15 years of everything I knew and experienced and learned in designing so many brands and put it into a book. And I always thought, if people read this book before they started their entrepreneurial journey, it would save them so much pain later on. So no, but it's really cool. I get a lot of great feedback from it, and I think it's really useful. I mean, there isn't a book on home service branding that actually exists until this book came out. So it's pretty cool, and I'm just happy that I can share and give some tips for people, even people that never become clients, just so that they can hopefully get on better footing.
Yeah, that's the same mindset as our faithful leader, April. She wrote the Playbook for deck book builders. And so if you want to know what we're up to, go to deckbuildermarketers.com/events. And if you're interested in the book, deckbuildermarketers.com/book. So that's all we have today. Dan, again, it's great spending time with another Paisan. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And we hope all of you got something out of branding. And if not, hit Dan up on the socials. Slide into them DMs, as the kids say. Thank you. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Thanks so much for having me on. April, I hope you feel better, by the way, too.
Hey, deck building community. Enjoyed the show? Hit subscribe and give us your thoughts. We love hearing from you. Ready to level up your business? Visit deckbuildermarketers.com. Check out our services and let's build your success together. Don't forget to download our free guides. They're a game changer. Thanks for tuning in to We Love Deck Builders, and see you on the next episode.